The bomber shudders. 28,000 feet over the Ruhr Valley, and Technical Sergeant James Walsh can see them, black puffs blooming below like grotesque flowers. Flak. The 88mm shells burst at 26,000 feet, their shrapnel clawing upward through thin air that should be sanctuary. Should be. But the German gunners have calculated wrong. The B-17 Flying Fortress climbs higher, its 4 Wright Cyclone engines screaming defiance into air so thin a man would black out in 60 seconds without oxygen. Walsh adjusts his mask, feeling the rubber press cold against his face. Through the plexiglass he watches condensation trails streak behind them, ghostly fingers pointing back toward England. Below, another formation isn't so lucky. The B-24 Liberators fly 7,000 feet lower, trapped in the killing zone where the 88s thrive. Walsh sees one take a direct hit. The silver fuselage crumples like paper, spilling tiny figures into the void. He counts 3 parachutes. The crew was 10. Steady, the pilot's voice crackles through the intercom. Target in 2 minutes. Walsh knows what keeps them alive up here. Not armor, their aluminum skin as thin as a nickel. Not guns, the Messerschmitts won't climb this high. It's something else, something mechanical. Something spinning at 24,000 revolutions per minute beneath each engine cowling, forcing compressed air into cylinders that should be gasping for breath. The Germans call it impossible. Their fighters stall at 25,000 feet, pilots choking behind leather masks as engines cough and die. But the Americans keep climbing. Higher. Always higher. And somewhere down in Lynn, Massachusetts, in a General Electric factory that reeks of oil and hot metal, they're building more of the devices that make this altitude possible. The Turbocharger. A weapon that doesn't kill. It survives.
January 1937. Nazi Germany is rearming, and the U.S. Army Air Corps faces a problem written in physics. Altitude equals survival. Fly high enough and anti-aircraft guns can't reach you. Fly high enough and enemy fighters can't intercept. But every 1,000 feet of altitude steals 15% of an engine's power. At 20,000 feet, a bomber's engines produce half their rated horsepower. At 30,000 feet, they produce nothing. They die. Major General Frank Andrews knows this. He's watched the Boeing Model 299 prototype, soon to be designated B-17, struggle to reach 25,000 feet. The 4 Pratt & Whitney engines wheeze and falter, starved for oxygen. It's not enough. The German 88mm flak guns can reach 26,000 feet. The new Flak 41 model, 35,000. The mathematics are brutal. Bombers must fly higher than guns can shoot. But how do you make an engine breathe where there's no air? The answer sits in a research paper from 1918, gathering dust in Wright Field archives. Dr. Sanford Moss, General Electric, a device called a turbo supercharger. During World War I, Moss proved the concept atop Pikes Peak, 14,000 feet, where a Liberty engine should produce only 230 horsepower. With his turbine-driven compressor spinning, fed by exhaust gases, that same engine delivered 356 horsepower. Sea-level performance. At altitude. The Air Corps places orders for 13 YB-17 test aircraft. One, tail number 37369, designated Y-1B-17A, will be equipped with 4 General Electric turbo superchargers. The modification costs Boeing nearly $100,000 of their own money. The Air Corps won't pay for unproven technology. The test aircraft is scheduled to fly in 1937. It doesn't. Turbochargers keep failing, exhaust manifolds crack, turbine wheels shatter. The mounting position above the engine nacelles creates airflow problems that shake the entire wing structure. Boeing engineers stare at the grounded aircraft. They have 9 months to make it work, or the Germans win the sky.
The Boeing engineering team works through winter nights in 1937, redesigning what should be impossible. Move the turbochargers, not above the engines, below. It sounds simple. It's not. Chief Engineer Ed Wells sketches new exhaust routing that snakes around landing gear wells. The number 2 and 3 engines require elaborate plumbing, 18 feet of steel tubing that must withstand 1,500-degree exhaust gases while flexing with engine vibration. One crack, one leak, and the system fails. Each General Electric Type B2 turbocharger weighs 130 pounds. A steel turbine wheel spins up 21,300 revolutions per minute, driven by exhaust that screams through nozzles at 1,200 feet per second. The compressor wheel inhales cold air at minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, compresses it until it's hot enough to pre-ignite fuel, then routes it through an intercooler before feeding the engine. 4 systems, 4 engines, 16 separate failure points. Amos Burke, test engineer, watches the first ground run. The turbo spools up with a rising shriek that makes his teeth ache. Exhaust glows cherry red through gaps in the cowling. He can feel the heat radiating through his coveralls from 6 feet away. The manifold pressure gauge climbs. 30 inches at sea level, normal. 35 inches, 40 inches, 45. The Wright Cyclone engine is producing full rated power, 1,200 horsepower, while sitting on the ground. Burke checks his calculations. If it can do this at sea level, at altitude, it should maintain full power up to... He stops, rechecks the numbers. 38,000 feet, more than 2 miles higher than any bomber has ever flown, 7 miles above the Earth, where the air pressure is 1/4 of sea level, where unprotected men die in minutes, where German flak guns can't reach. The Y-1B-17A flies for the first time on April 29, 1938. The test pilot climbs to 35,000 feet. The engines never falter. The war for altitude has begun.
May 1938, Wright Field, Ohio. Test pilot Major Stanley Umstead levels off at 37,500 feet. Through his oxygen mask, each breath tastes of rubber and metal. The cockpit thermometer reads -58 degrees Fahrenheit. His electrically heated suit struggles against cold that would freeze exposed skin in 30 seconds. But the engines sing. All 4 turbocharged Wright Cyclones pull full manifold. The airspeed indicator shows 311 miles per hour, 72 miles per hour faster than the non-turbocharged Y-1B-17 could manage at its maximum altitude of 27,800 feet. Umstead keys his radio. Wright Field, this is Y-1B-17A, maintaining 37,500 feet. All engines normal, oil pressure normal, no vibration. Below him, an entire German flak battery would be useless. The news reaches Germany through intelligence channels by June. Luftwaffe engineers don't believe the reports. No reciprocating engine can maintain full power above 30,000 feet. The laws of physics forbid it. The Americans must be lying, or their altitude measurement instruments are faulty. They're wrong. By late 1938, the Army Air Corps orders the B-17B into production, all equipped with turbo superchargers. Production crews at Boeing's Seattle plant struggle with the complexity. Each aircraft requires 68 feet of stainless steel exhaust tubing, hand-fitted and welded. A single pinhole leak can cause a turbocharger failure. Quality control becomes obsessive. Lieutenant Robert Williams flies one of the first operational B-17Bs in 1939. His squadron practices high-altitude formation flying, something no Air Force has ever attempted. At 28,000 feet, the bombers maintain tight defensive boxes while crews breathe bottled oxygen through masks that freeze to their faces. Williams watches vapor trails streaming behind his wingtips. Each trail is a signature, visible for miles. They're no longer invisible, but now they're unreachable. The Germans begin designing new anti-aircraft guns with longer barrels, heavier shells. The altitude race accelerates. By 1941, General Electric's Lynn facility operates 24 hours. The turbo supercharger production line stretches across 200,000 square feet, workers assembling devices that will decide whether boys live or die 7 miles above Europe. Production numbers tell the story. 1940, 2,847 turbo superchargers. 1942, 70,000. 1943, 135,000. Each unit machined to tolerances of 1,000th of an inch. Each turbine wheel balanced so precisely that at 21,300 RPM, it generates less vibration than a wristwatch. Intelligence officer Captain Morris Klein studies captured German documents from a downed Messerschmitt Bf-109. The pilot's handbook warns, do not pursue American bombers above 8,000 meters. Engine performance deteriorates rapidly. Pilots may experience loss of consciousness. 8,000 meters, 26,000 feet. The B-17's operational ceiling, 35,000 feet. The Luftwaffe responds with the Focke-Wulf FW-190, equipped with BMW radial engines and experimental turbochargers, but German metallurgy can't match American steel alloys. Their turbine wheels crack after 20 hours of operation. American units last 200 hours. Strategic planners in Washington study range calculations. A turbocharged B-17 carries 2,780 gallons of fuel. Flying at 28,000 feet, where air resistance is 60% less than at 10,000 feet, the bomber can reach Berlin from England bases, with bombs, with fuel to return. Without turbochargers, maximum combat radius, 600 miles. With turbochargers, 900 miles. The difference between hitting Hamburg and hitting Berlin, between striking the Ruhr and striking Dresden, between tactical nuisance and strategic devastation. The B-24 Liberator enters production with Pratt & Whitney R1830 engines and General Electric B-22 turbo superchargers. It flies 7,000 feet lower than the B-17. Its Davis wing design sacrifices altitude for speed and range, but it can still reach 28,000 feet, still above the worst flak, still in the killing zone for German fighters equipped for high-altitude interception. By 1943, Germany dedicates 1.3 million personnel to flak defenses. They fire upward into air too thin to breathe, hunting bombers they can barely reach.
August 1st, 1943. Mission 84. Ploiești, Romania. Staff Sergeant Eddie Deerfield crouches behind his waist gun as the B-24 Liberator Sandman crosses 25,000 feet. The .50 caliber barrel is so cold it'll freeze flesh on contact. Through his oxygen mask, each breath comes with a hiss-click rhythm that counts the seconds until they reach the target. The intercooler ducting vibrates beneath his boots. He can feel the turbochargers working, a high-frequency vibration that means the General Electric units are spinning at 24,000 RPM, forcing compressed air into engines that should be gasping for breath. Flak at 2 o'clock. The bombardier's voice cracks through static. Deerfield sees them, black puffs appearing like evil magic, each explosion marking where an 88mm shell fragments into thousands of steel slivers. The German gunners are good. They're tracking the formation's altitude, adjusting fuses to detonate at 26,000 feet. Almost high enough. Almost. Sandman lurches. The deck tilts 15 degrees. Through the open waist window, no plexiglass, just frigid air shrieking past at 200 miles per hour. Deerfield watches a B-24 to their left take shrapnel through the fuselage. Its number 3 engine trails black smoke. The turbocharger is hit. The bomber starts descending. Has to. Without the turbo, the engine can't maintain altitude, down to 24,000 feet, 22,000, into the heart of the flak concentration. The entire aircraft explodes in a yellow flash. Deerfield's bombardier screams through the intercom. "Bomb bay doors open, 10 seconds. The manifold pressure gauges in the cockpit read 48 inches, full power. All 4 engines pulling maximum boost at an altitude where unassisted engines would produce 40% power. Below, the Ploiești refineries stretch across the Romanian plain, the source of 60% of Germany's petroleum. The bomber shudders as 4,000 pounds of explosives drop free. They're still 7 miles high, still breathing, still fighting a war in air too thin for human lungs.
The General Electric B-22 turbo supercharger represents 18 years of metallurgical evolution from Sanford Moss's 1918 prototype. Start with exhaust gas, 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit, exiting the Wright Cyclone R1820-97 engine at supersonic velocity. The gas enters a collector ring, cast steel, that must withstand thermal cycling from -40 to +1,200 degrees every mission. A crack here means catastrophic failure. From the collector ring, exhaust flows through a tailpipe to the nozzle box. Inside, 12 precisely machined nozzles that convert thermal energy into kinetic energy, accelerating the gas to 1,200 feet per second. The jet stream hits turbine wheel buckets, machined from heat-treated steel containing chromium, molybdenum, and trace amounts of vanadium. 24,000 revolutions per minute. The turbine wheel, 10 inches in diameter, weighing 18 pounds, spins on a shaft connected directly to a centrifugal compressor. No gearing, no clutch, pure mechanical coupling. The compressor wheel inhales ambient air at whatever pressure exists at altitude. At 30,000 feet, 4.37 pounds per square inch, compared to 14.7 at sea level. The compressor boosts that 4.37 psi to 18 psi, roughly 4 times atmospheric pressure at that altitude. But compression generates heat. The air temperature rises to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to cause pre-ignition and engine detonation. Solution: the intercooler, a heat exchanger in the wing leading edge, where ambient air at -40 degrees cools the compressed charge back down to acceptable intake temperatures. The cooled, compressed air finally reaches the engine's supercharger, a gear-driven unit that provides additional boost. 2-stage compression, turbocharger plus supercharger. Result: sea-level air density in cylinders 7 miles above the Earth. But the system is fragile. Ball bearings in the turbine shaft operate at 900 degrees Fahrenheit. Oil flow must be precisely regulated. Too little and bearing seize, too much and oil coking blocks passages. Maintenance crews inspect turbochargers after every mission. A single crack in the turbine wheel can send fragments through the nacelle at bullet velocity. The device that makes high-altitude bombing possible also makes every mission a mechanical dice roll.
Lieutenant Robert Morgan, pilot of Memphis Belle,
records in his diary after the 16th mission, "The cold is worse than the flak." He's describing life at 30,000 feet, temperature minus 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Crew members wear electrically heated suits beneath sheepskin jackets, but the heating elements fail regularly. Waist gunners stand at open windows where wind screams past at 200 miles per hour. Their hands freeze to metal. Their oxygen masks collect condensation that freezes into ice. Ball turret gunner Alan McGee, 360th Bomb Squadron, describes the psychological impact of altitude. You're hanging in a plexiglass sphere beneath the aircraft, surrounded by nothing but thin air and German fighters. The turret is so small you can't wear a parachute. If the plane goes down, you have to be cranked back up into the fuselage before you can bail out. But at 30,000 feet, you have maybe 90 seconds of consciousness if your oxygen line is cut. The oxygen. Always the oxygen. Each B-17 carries 18 G1 cylinders, each containing 30 cubic feet of oxygen at 450 pounds per square inch. At 30,000 feet, one man consumes his cylinder in approximately 5 hours. A 10-man crew burns through 85 cylinders on a 9-hour mission. Medical officer Captain Howard Snyder documents 63 cases of hypoxia during August 1943 alone. Symptoms: euphoria, impaired judgment, loss of motor control, unconsciousness within 1 minute, death within 20. Crews learn to watch each other. If a man starts singing, if he removes his mask, if he appears drunk, grab him, force the mask back on, turn his oxygen regulator to full flow. The turbochargers make high altitude possible, but at 30,000 feet, human biology operates at its absolute limit. Every breath depends on technology. Every breath is borrowed time. Sergeant Walsh tightens his mask after each mission and whispers the same prayer: "Thank God for General Electric."
Rechlin Air Base, Germany, June 1943. Luftwaffe engineers disassemble a captured B-17F, serial number 42-3070, shot down over Bremen. The aircraft carried 4 General Electric B-2 turbo superchargers. German metallurgists want to understand why their own turbocharger program has failed. They discover the answer in the turbine wheels. American steel contains alloy combinations Germany cannot replicate, chromium-molybdenum blends that maintain structural integrity at temperatures where German steel fails after 20 hours of operation. The Americans achieve 200 hours between overhauls. Test pilot Hans Fay flies a captured B-17 to 35,000 feet. His report to high command is devastating. The aircraft maintains full power at altitudes where our fighters cannot effectively operate. Recommend development of high-altitude interceptor variants of Bf-109 and FW-190. The German response comes in 3 forms. First, improved anti-aircraft guns. The 88mm Flak 41 enters production with a longer barrel and higher muzzle velocity. Effective ceiling 35,000 feet. But the gun is complex, expensive, and unreliable. Only limited numbers reach operational status. Second, pressurized fighters. The Focke-Wulf TA-152H, designed specifically for high-altitude interception. Maximum ceiling 48,000 feet, but it doesn't enter service until January 1945. Too late, too few. Third, concentrated flak. By 1944, Germany deploys over 15,000 88mm guns in defensive belts 20 kilometers deep. Fire control becomes sophisticated: radar tracking, predicted trajectories, proximity fuses. The strategy isn't to reach maximum altitude, it's to create such dense fire between 20 and 30,000 feet that bombers cannot fly straight and level long enough to bomb accurately. American losses escalate. In the first half of 1944, casualty rates reach 712 killed or missing per 1,000 crewmen serving 6 months. Barely 1 in 4 complete the required 25 missions. The turbocharger grants altitude. Altitude grants some protection. But at 28,000 feet, where most B-17s actually operate, the German guns can still kill. The margin between survival and death narrows to 2,000 feet, or 1 failed turbocharger.
February 1945. The war in Europe approaches its end. By now, Boeing has produced 12,731 B-17 Flying Fortresses. Consolidated has built 18,500 B-24 Liberators. General Electric has manufactured more than 300,000 turbo superchargers, every single one equipped with technology traced back to Sanford Moss's 1918 test atop Pikes Peak. a Liberty engine on a Packard truck, proving that exhaust-driven compression could overcome altitude's power loss. The strategic impact is measurable. Without turbochargers, American bombers cannot reach Berlin from English bases, cannot fly above effective German flat concentrations, cannot maintain formation cohesion at altitudes where fighters struggle to intercept. With turbochargers, the combined bomber offensive delivers 2.7 million tons of bombs on Axis targets. Whether this strategic bombing campaign shortened the war remains debated. What is not debatable, high-altitude operations required technology that defeated physics. The device itself is simple. A turbine wheel, a compressor, a bearing shaft spinning at inhuman speeds. No electronics, no computers, just precision machining and metallurgy operating at the absolute edge of 1940s material science. After the war, Dr. Sanford Moss, 73 years old, half-blind, still working at General Electric, receives the Collier Trophy. The citation reads, "For development of the turbo supercharger enabling American aircraft to operate at altitudes previously impossible." The technology evolves. Jet engines replace reciprocating engines, but the principle remains: compress air, increase power, defy altitude. The B-29 Superfortress uses turbo superchargers to reach 40,000 feet and deliver atomic weapons over Japan. Modern turbofan engines trace their lineage directly to Moss's exhaust-driven compressor design. In aviation museums across America, B-17s sit silent, their turbochargers cold and still. Visitors walk past without noticing the bulges beneath the engine nacelles, devices that once screamed at 24,000 RPM, forcing life into engines starved for breath. Altitude isn't freedom, but for 3 years over Europe it was survival measured in feet, and every foot was bought with turbocharged air. Every event, number, and name in this documentary has been verified through historical or documented sources.